"This is my daughter's house now," she said, with that same smug smile she always wore like cheap perfume. I blinked. My fingers curled instinctively around the banister. Ashley stood behind her, arms crossed like a bodyguard made of lip gloss and entitlement. Those 8 words? They hit harder than the cancer that took my dad. Let me back up. My name is Daniela Foster. I'm 28, no kids, never married, pretty normal by most standards. I work in HR for a mid-sized tech company in Austin. I like structure. Order. Knowing where the coffee mugs go and who's going to pick up the Amazon package at the door. And up until 5 months ago, my life, my quiet, little, predictable life, was finally starting to feel like mine again. Then Dad died. It wasn't sudden. He'd been battling pancreatic cancer for a year, and we all knew the clock was ticking. But knowing doesn't prepare you. Not really. Not when you lose the one parent who never missed your school plays, who showed up with greasy burgers after your first breakup, who stayed up until 3 a.m. helping you fix your credit score. That was my dad. Steady. Soft-spoken. The kind of man who kept every utility bill in a labeled folder. And the kind of man who married my stepmother, Valerie. Now, to be fair, Valerie wasn't evil. Not at first. She wasn't the cartoon version of a wicked stepmother. She's one of those women who always looks like she's about to give a toast. Perfect posture, great hair, and a voice that could slice through drywall. She came into our lives when I was 19 and off at college. Dad had met her at a charity auction. She was charming. Confident. Wore red lipstick in the middle of the day and didn't care what anyone thought. But she also had this way of correcting you in front of others. Tiny things, like, actually, Daniela prefers almond milk, or, she probably didn't mean to leave her car parked like that. Always with a smile. Like it was helpful. I never hated her. We weren't close, but I respected her. Until she brought her daughter. Ashley. Ashley was 23 going on sorority queen. Blonde, tan, endlessly performative. The kind of person who said #blessed out loud and expected you to laugh. She moved like someone who knew she'd never been told no in her life. And for reasons still unclear to me, she never liked me. Maybe because I was quiet. Maybe because I didn't need her approval. Maybe because I wore black flats and she thought that was a moral failing. Dad didn't talk about Ashley much, and she lived out of state, so we never really crossed paths, until the funeral. I should have known something was wrong when Valerie didn't cry. Not once. Not during the service, not during the burial, not even at home that night when I offered her my dad's favorite blanket. She just looked at it and said, "That won't be necessary anymore." I told myself grief looks different for everyone. That she was in shock. That she'd mourn in private. But I was wrong. 3 days after the funeral, I came downstairs to find Valerie at the dining room table with a real estate agent. She didn't even flinch when I walked in. "You should start thinking about where you want to go next," she said casually, stirring cream into her coffee. "Ashley and I are thinking of repainting this room. Maybe open up that wall." Ashley didn't even look up from her phone. Just said, "This carpet has to go. It's depressing." I laughed. Out loud. Because this was my house. I don't mean emotionally. I mean legally. It had been deeded to me 3 years ago. Dad told me directly, not because he loved me more, but because he knew how much this place meant to me. He even made the utility bills come in my name to build my credit and start establishing ownership. The will hadn't even been read yet, and this woman was plotting an HGTV makeover like she was hosting a reality show. "I think you're confused," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice calm. "This is my house." That's when she stood up, walked around the table, and said it. "This is my daughter's house now." I didn't react. I didn't scream. I just walked upstairs, locked my door, and called the attorney who helped Dad write his will. I didn't even know if he was still in practice. He was. And not only that, he still had the original notarized copy. 3 days later, I met with him in a coffee shop downtown. My hands were shaking. I hadn't eaten since that day in the kitchen. "You have every right to be in that house," he said, sliding the paperwork toward me. "In fact, your father left specific instructions in the will. It's yours. Period." Valerie wasn't even included. I stared at the page. My name, in bold. Full ownership. Every brick. Every bill. I didn't cry until I got back in my car. The next morning, I walked downstairs, document in hand. Valerie was in the living room, her legs curled under her, Ashley perched beside her like a golden trophy. I set the papers down on the coffee table. Valerie looked at them. Her expression didn't change, but her posture did. She sank back into the couch like gravity had just increased. "He promised me everything," she whispered. I met her eyes. "He just promised." She didn't argue. She didn't scream. She just sat there, blinking. "Ashley, though?" She exploded. "This is unfair. Mom deserves everything. Dad said she'd be taken care of. You think this house is yours just because of some stupid paper?" I looked at her. Calm. Quiet. Firm. "It's not just paper. It's law." The next 2 weeks were a blur of slammed doors and whispered arguments. Valerie and Ashley stayed in the guest room. They packed nothing. Made no plans. Like if they ignored the truth long enough, it would change. Then came the middle hook. I came home from work to find Ashley hosting a wine night in the living room like it was her personal Airbnb. A charcuterie board out, throw pillows rearranged. One of the guests gestured around and said, "This your place?" "It's gorgeous." Ashley took a long sip of Pinot and smiled. "Yeah. My mom and I just inherited it. We're giving it a little facelift." I stood in the doorway, still wearing my badge from work. Her friend looked at me. "Oh, are you the interior designer?" I didn't respond. Just walked past them and up the stairs. But inside, something cracked. That was the moment I felt it. The shift. The line between patience and permission. And the end hook? That came 2 nights later when I walked past the guest room and heard Valerie on the phone. "Don't worry, baby," she said, her voice low and sweet. "We won't be here long. She's going to crack. I just need a few more days, and then it's ours. One way or another." I stopped breathing. Because it wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was a plan. And I was done being the quiet one. I didn't go to the housewarming party they threw that Saturday. Yes, they threw it. Valerie called it a celebration of fresh beginnings, complete with champagne flutes and a charcuterie spread that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I stayed upstairs. Didn't come down. Didn't speak. But I could hear the clinking glasses through the floorboards and Ashley's laugh, sharp and high, piercing through the vents like a bird stuck in a cage. They toasted without me. She toasted her new chapter in my living room while her mother smiled that slow, snake-like smile from the leather chair Dad and I picked out together 2 years ago. I pressed my hand to the wall and told myself to remember that sound. Not because I cared to join. But because one day, I'd want to play it back in my head and smile. The next morning, I unplugged the coffee machine in the kitchen and carried it up to my room. It was petty. I knew that. But it was also mine. A housewarming gift from Dad when I got promoted. Valerie noticed, of course. She always noticed. But she didn't say anything. She just raised an eyebrow when she came downstairs and saw the empty space on the counter where the machine used to sit. Instead of asking, she went out and bought herself a fancy espresso maker and made sure to leave the receipt where I'd see it. That was her style, weaponized politeness dressed in sugar. I started moving in silence. No arguments, no confrontations. I cooked early in the morning or after they'd gone to bed. I washed my laundry in the sink when I didn't want to hear Ashley's sighs about my boring clothes in the shared laundry room. I left no dishes in the sink. I didn't use their food. I didn't even look at them if I could avoid it. I began keeping a little notebook in my room, writing things down. Dates, comments, receipts. Ashley once tossed one of my mail packages in the trash because it was just some boring paperwork, and I wrote that down too. The more invisible I made myself, the more comfortable they became. Ashley started bringing over her boyfriend, Travis, or maybe Trevor. One of those guys who wears backward baseball caps indoors and calls women chicks like he thinks it's charming. He always smelled like too much cologne and used my Netflix profile without asking. Once I caught him sitting in Dad's old recliner, shoes off, eating chips out of the bag and dropping crumbs on the armrest. I didn't say a word. I just walked upstairs. Let him think I was broken. Let them all think I was done fighting. Because here's the thing about being underestimated, it buys you time. I let my friends think I was just taking time to grieve. I stepped back from the group chat. Turned down brunch invitations. Ignored the usual Friday happy hour pings. I even took a personal leave from work. Just a short one, unpaid. Enough to make it look like I was unraveling. It wasn't entirely untrue. For a while, I was unraveling. I spent whole afternoons lying on the floor of my room, staring at the ceiling, wondering how grief could coexist with this much rage. And still, somehow, the tears refused to come. Even when I wanted to cry. Especially when I wanted to cry. The fury was just too big. One night, Ashley barged into my room without knocking. She had a towel on her head and a half-eaten protein bar in her hand. Hey, quick question. Would you be super upset if we painted the hallway? This beige is giving, like, DMV energy. I stared at her. She stood in the doorway like she owned the place. Like she was doing me a favor by asking. Paint whatever you want, I said. It's all temporary, right? Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't respond. Just gave me a tight smile and said, cool, cool. Just checking. That was the moment I knew she didn't suspect a thing. 2 days later, a package arrived on the front porch. I opened the door before they could see and signed for it myself. Ashley's name was on the label, but I carried it into the garage and placed it neatly on the highest shelf, far from reach. I didn't mention it. Neither did she. I waited to see how long it would take her to notice. She didn't ask. But a week later, I caught her arguing on the phone with someone named Brett. I ordered it. They said it was delivered. I don't know, maybe it got stolen, she hissed. I wrote that down too. 2 nights after that, I met with a woman named Marcia. She was older, mid-60s maybe, with thick silver hair and a firm handshake. She used to work in estate law, and now she did consulting work on the side. Quiet, discreet, thorough. She looked over the wool I brought and nodded slowly. This is clean, she said. Very clean. You have no reason to be worried. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I'm not worried. I'm just planning. Marcia folded her hands in front of her. Do you have documentation of their behavior? Texts, recordings, anything like that? Not yet, I said. But I will. She leaned back, thoughtful. What exactly are you hoping to do, Daniela? I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I looked down at my hands. The same hands that had sorted Dad's pill bottles. The same hands that had folded his socks and turned the pages of his medical documents. The same hands that now felt like they belonged to a stranger. I'm not hoping to do anything, I said finally. I'm going to do something. That night, I walked through the house like it was already a memory. The baseboards I helped paint with Dad on that cold January weekend when the heater broke. The window seat where I used to read while he made dinner. The scratch on the hallway wall from the time I tried to carry my desk upstairs alone. None of it belonged to them. Not really. They could repaint, refurnish, refinish, but the bones were still mine. The next morning, I slipped out early. I drove 2 hours to a town I hadn't visited in over a decade and walked into a dusty little office above a laundromat. The man who greeted me was wearing a faded blazer and had a voice like gravel. He used to handle my father's property records before he moved his legal affairs to Austin. He remembered me instantly. "You were the one who played violin," he said. "Your dad always brought that up." I smiled politely. "I need your help." Quietly. He closed the door behind me. Back at home, I made myself scarce. I let Valerie believe she had won. I let Ashley think I had checked out. And every now and then, I'd catch Valerie watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. There was something almost satisfied in her gaze, like I was finally behaving the way she expected. Like she was watching a poorly trained dog learn its place. She made her own moves too. I came downstairs one day to find that a framed photo of me and Dad was gone from the hallway table. In its place sat a fake plant and a candle labeled Tranquility. When I asked if she'd seen the picture, she tilted her head and said, "Oh, I assumed it was outdated." Ashley wanted to refresh the space. I didn't argue. I just wrote it down. Then I quietly checked the trash bins, top to bottom. I found the photo in the kitchen bag, face down under an empty wine bottle. One evening, I overheard her on the phone again. She was standing near the back patio, wine glass in hand, her voice smooth and syrupy. "Honestly, it's just a matter of time. Daniela's not strong. Never has been. She folds when things get hard. I give it a month, and we'll be able to file for residency rights. Once we establish tenancy, well, there are ways." I didn't move. I didn't even flinch. Just stood in the hallway until she went back inside. Then I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water with steady hands. People think silence means surrender. But silence can be the sound of strategy. A week later, I went to a hair appointment I hadn't made. A place across town where no one knew me. I cut off 4 inches and let the stylist dye it a deep, unfamiliar auburn. When I looked in the mirror afterward, I barely recognized myself. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like a good thing. On the way home, I stopped at the hardware store and picked up a small security camera. Just one. Small enough to hide in the bookshelf in the living room. A test. The next night, while they watched a movie in the den, I installed it. They never noticed. By the time Ashley started using my guest towels and claiming my houseplants as her decor accents, I was no longer angry. I was something else. Something calmer. Sharper. And one night, while Valerie was out and Ashley was curled up on the couch texting Brett and laughing like she owned the world, I made her a cup of tea. Set it down gently in front of her. "You don't have to keep trying to make peace," she said without looking up. "We're already moving forward. I've even been shopping for a desk for the office upstairs. Once things are official, I'm gonna turn it into my studio." I smiled. "Enjoy it while it lasts." She looked up at me then. Confused. I didn't explain. Just walked back upstairs, one step at a time, like a woman with all the time in the world. It started with a catalog envelope that Ashley left on the console table by the door. The name on the invoice inside wasn't hers, it was mine. A $278 purchase charged to an old joint account Dad and I had opened years ago. I knew it still existed, but it had never occurred to me that Ashley would go digging through legal drawers to find access to it. It wasn't the money. It was the assumption, the entitlement, the quiet, grinning nerve of it all. I scanned the invoice, tucked the original back inside the envelope, and returned it to where she left it. If she was bold enough to put the charge under my name, she deserved to believe she'd gotten away with it, right up until she didn't. Ashley talked louder now, as if the volume of her voice could make her authority real. One afternoon I heard her pacing the landing upstairs, slippers scuffing the floor like she was breaking in new territory. "We'll host it here, obviously," she said into her phone, her voice bubbly and dismissive. "My place has the space. The yard's perfect for a brunch vibe. Daniela's barely around anyway. She's like, I don't know, background noise?" I was in the hallway, listening just behind the bathroom door. Her words weren't surprising, but still, they lit something in my stomach. Not anger. Just clarity. I let her finish her call, waited for her to go downstairs, then walked calmly to my room and opened the folder under my bed. I slid the new invoice in behind the photocopies of Valerie's wine-soaked comments about tenancy and the photo of Ashley's misdelivered package still resting on the garage shelf. The folder was growing thicker by the week. They were preparing for a birthday party now. Not Ashley's birthday, but the house's. A home-iversary, she called it, giggling over wine with Valerie as they discussed themes and string lights and party favors. Valerie wanted catered sushi and signature cocktails. Ashley insisted on a champagne tower. I watched from the hallway, pretending to pass by with a laundry basket. Neither of them looked up. Later that night, I replayed the footage from the living room camera. Valerie's voice came through clear. "I think once this party's over, we'll get serious about updating the kitchen. We could open up the space, get that wall knocked down." Ashley's reply, "Totally. Once it's official, I want to make the office mine. Honestly, Daniela's just squatting at this point." I pressed pause. Backed it up. Watched it again. The way they said official, like some invisible paperwork had already cleared. Like I was a remnant. I met Marcia at the same diner 2 days later. She wore a navy blazer this time and looked more alert. "You've got enough to act now," she told me. Audio, written documentation, even attempted financial impersonation. "We could file a cease and desist today, notify the estate court." I shook my head. "Not yet. I want them confident. I want them arrogant. And I want everyone they invited to that party to be watching when it ends." She gave me a long look. "You do know you're risking more emotional damage by waiting." "I'm past that," I said. "What's left is strategy." Ashley's boyfriend, Trevor, or Tyler, or something equally punchable, started coming around more. I heard him call my name once. "Hey, Daniela, we're thinking about putting the grill on the back patio. That cool?" I didn't answer. Just walked past him with my keys in hand. That night, I turned off the water heater via the access panel before their double-date night. Passive? Maybe. But I didn't hear them laugh when they got back and tried to shower. I was getting bolder too. The second camera went up in the kitchen, tucked between a row of decorative mugs no one ever touched. The third went in the upstairs hallway, angled to catch door traffic. Nothing in bedrooms or bathrooms, nothing illegal. Just enough to trace movement, record voices, build the story. I made copies of the recordings. 2 separate flash drives. One went into the trunk of my car. The other I dropped off at a friend's apartment with no explanation. Valerie wasn't completely quiet either. One afternoon I came home early from the law library and saw a stranger in the kitchen. A woman in slacks holding a clipboard, asking questions about square footage and property lines. Valerie was smiling too brightly, her voice a touch higher than normal. I made my presence known with a polite but firm, "Can I help you with something?" The woman turned fast, startled. Valerie's smile didn't falter. "Just a contractor giving us a consultation," she said. "For possible renovations." Did you mention whose name is on the deed? I asked. Her smile faded just a fraction. We were only exploring options. Well, be sure your exploration doesn't cross into trespassing, I said calmly, locking eyes with the contractor. You're not authorized to plan anything here. And any structural evaluation without the owner's consent is null. She apologized. Valerie didn't. But when they left, she poured herself a second glass of wine. I started keeping my door locked at night. Not out of fear, but because people like them always get nosy when they feel untouchable. One morning I found my desk drawer slightly ajar, a page out of place in my planner. It could have been my imagination, but I wasn't taking chances. That same week, I dropped into an old friend's real estate office across town. She was surprised to see me. We hadn't spoken since college. Daniela? Wow, it's been forever. What brings you in? I'm prepping for a situation, I said. And I might need a few names of trusted local assessors. Discreet ones. She didn't ask questions. Just opened a drawer and handed me 3 cards. You okay? I will be. That night, Valerie made steak for dinner and set 3 plates at the table. She called up the stairs once, then twice. I didn't answer. I ate cold noodles in my room with the folder open in front of me, flipping through it like it was a novel I had memorized. Every line a confirmation. Every line a wound-turned weapon. Ashley's email inbox was still unsecured. I didn't even have to guess the password. Her birthday and a dog emoji. I took screenshots of one exchange with a friend named Brielle. Honestly, Daniela's being so chill I almost feel bad. But once the transfer happens, I'll give her time to figure it out. It'll be easier that way. I highlighted that line, printed it, and slid it into the folder with the others. The near miss came the next morning. I had just retrieved the printed email and was sliding it under my bed when Ashley knocked on my door. Hey, you got a minute? I opened the door halfway. What's up? She stepped in a little, eyes darting around. I was gonna ask, have you seen a flash drive lying around? Black with a blue strip. Had some stuff I need for the party. My throat dried for just a second. No, I said. Haven't seen anything. Weird, she muttered. I swear I had it. Maybe Brett grabbed it by mistake. Anyway. She trailed off, squinting toward my bookshelf. I stepped slightly in front of it. Anything else? She blinked, then smiled. Nope. Thanks. When she left, I sat down and forced myself to breathe. She didn't find anything. Not yet. But it was close. Valerie was quieter after the contractor incident. But I caught her one afternoon on the phone with someone named Cynthia. We'll just file a residency claim after the party. It's the perfect time, everyone will see we've been living here full time. Courts love stability. I recorded the entire call from the hallway. 2 days before the party, she left a manila folder on the counter. Inside was a letter from a property attorney I didn't recognize, filled with vague legal jargon about occupancy and financial contributions. No direct action yet, just fishing. But they were testing the waters. That evening, I came downstairs to find them hanging lights across the back patio. Ashley was humming to herself, Valerie barking gentle corrections. It looked like a movie set. I stood there, watching. Oh hey, Ashley chirped. We're doing champagne first, then speeches. You're welcome to stay for the toast, of course. I tilted my head. Thanks. I'll think about it. She turned back to the lights, fully convinced she'd won. That night, I backed up the recordings to a secure drive, double-checked my evidence folder, and laid out a simple black dress for Saturday. Nothing flashy. Just clean, structured. Prepared. They were going to stand in my backyard and celebrate their conquest. They had no idea the guest list included someone from the bank, someone from the estate attorney's office, and someone from the county clerk's department, all of whom I'd invited personally, under the guise of reconnecting and maybe seeking some advice. Let them toast. Let them plan their studio renovations and champagne towers. Because in 48 hours, the real show was going to start. And I would be the one holding the final glass. By noon on Saturday, the backyard looked like a Pinterest board had exploded. White tablecloths fluttered in the breeze, pink and gold streamers crisscrossed from post to post, and champagne flutes shimmered in perfect symmetry on silver trays. Valerie wore a lavender wrap dress that probably cost a month of my rent, and Ashley floated between guests in heels too high for grass, her hair curled and glossy under the afternoon sun. A three-tiered cake stood proudly beneath a linen canopy beside a table stacked with branded favors that read, "1 year of home sweet home." The irony was sharp enough to taste. They hadn't even lasted 6 months. "Doesn't it look amazing?" Ashley asked, her smile too wide, her eyes flickering over me like I was a piece of furniture. "Seriously, Daniela, this place finally feels like it belongs to someone. You know what I mean?" I looked at the crowd, the decorations, the laughing guests who didn't know the truth yet. Then I met her eyes. "You're right, Ashley. It does." I stayed at the edges of the party, invisible in plain sight. Most of the guests were Valerie's Pilates friends or Ashley's social circle clones, loud, shallow, dripping with false praise. I held my glass of sparkling water and smiled politely, blending into the background. Exactly as planned. Because when you want to be heard, the most powerful thing you can do is wait for silence. By 2 o'clock, the scene was in full swing. Valerie was laughing too loudly with a man from her wine club. Ashley had already posed for photos with the cake, one arm draped around her mother like they were co-owners of some empire. I watched quietly as 3 people I had invited entered the garden, the man from the bank who'd helped Dad finalize his accounts, a woman from the county clerk's office who'd known me since high school, and a consultant who had worked with Marcia for decades. They mingled naturally, unaware that the stage they were walking into would soon turn from a celebration into a reckoning. Ashley clinked her glass and grinned. "Hey, everyone. Can I have your attention?" Her voice carried across the yard like a performance she'd practiced in the mirror. "Thank you all so much for coming to celebrate this beautiful milestone with us. This home has been such a blessing, such a sanctuary for my mom and me, and we are so excited about everything to come." The crowd clapped. Valerie stepped beside her, glowing with smug pride. "After such a difficult year, finding peace here has meant everything to us. We're looking forward to renovations, maybe even putting in a garden, something truly ours. Something truly ours." My fingers tightened around my glass. I could feel my pulse in my wrist. For 3 months I'd practiced silence, patience, strategy. But standing there, hearing her claim my father's house as her triumph, my throat constricted with something almost like grief. Not for them. For him. For everything they had tried to erase. I set the glass down. "Valerie," I said softly. The sound carried. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. She smiled too brightly. "Yes, dear?" "I think it's time I spoke." Ashley blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, sure. You want to say a few words?" I stepped forward, onto the patio. The air shifted. Even the cicadas went still. The cameras, ironically installed by Ashley herself for her livestream, were already rolling. I reached into my blazer and pulled out a thick folder, the same one that had lived under my bed for weeks. "You all seem to believe this house belongs to Valerie and Ashley," I began, my voice steady but low. "Some of you may have even received invitations that said as much. But there's something you should know. Something important." Valerie's hand froze on her wine glass. "Daniela, this isn't." I raised my voice just enough. "This is my father's notarized will. The real one. It names me, and only me, as the sole owner of this property, including the house, the land, the insurance, and every account connected to it. The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was electric. Furthermore, I said, turning a page, Valerie has repeatedly attempted to claim partial ownership through fraudulent documentation and misrepresentation of tenancy. I have recordings, notarized logs, and legal confirmations to prove it. Ashley, meanwhile, has been using an old family account to make purchases in my name. Ashley's face flushed red. That's not, Daniela, I didn't. I looked at her. My voice was calm, even. I have your email, your order confirmation, and your text to Brielle where you said, and I quote, once the transfer happens, I'll give her time to figure it out. The crowd rippled with whispers. Valerie's jaw tightened, but she wasn't done yet. You're twisting everything. He promised me this house, Daniela. He said we'd build our life here. I took one slow breath. He promised, Valerie. But he didn't sign. And promises aren't ownership. She stepped forward, her composure slipping. You're humiliating yourself in front of all these people. You think this performance makes you strong? No, I said. I think facts do. A woman from the county clerk's office approached cautiously. May I see the documents? I handed her the folder. She scanned the pages, her expression shifting from curiosity to stunned recognition. She nodded slowly. Everything here is legitimate. These are valid, legal documents. The consultant from Marsh's firm stepped forward as well. If Valerie or Ashley have been using this property under false claims, eviction can begin immediately once a notice is filed. The crowd gasped. Valerie went pale. Ashley dropped her glass, champagne spilled across the concrete like gold cracking into shards. Ashley's voice trembled. You planned this. You planned all of this. Pretending to be quiet. Pretending to be broken. I looked at her, and for the first time in months, I let the mask slip just slightly. No, Ashley. I was never pretending. I was broken. But I learned something important about broken things, they're sharp. Valerie's hand shook as she grabbed Ashley's arm. We'll contest it. We'll call our lawyer. This isn't over. The man from the bank cleared his throat. Actually, it is. This house deed was transferred years ago. Contesting it would be a waste of money. Valerie turned toward him in disbelief. What are you doing here? I was invited, he said simply. I looked at both of them, the cake behind them beginning to sag in the afternoon sun. You have 30 days to vacate. I'll have official notices delivered Monday. Valerie opened her mouth, then closed it again. Ashley stared down at the spilled champagne pooling around her shoes. Around us, the guests began to murmur, quiet, sharp, uncomfortable. Some slipped away toward the gate. Others just stared, eyes wide, hands half covering their mouths. The woman from the clerk's office handed back the folder. It's all in order, Daniela. Congratulations. I nodded and tucked it under my arm. Thank you. As I turned to go inside, I looked back once more. Valerie was still standing frozen, her lavender dress catching the wind, Ashley beside her looking suddenly small. Behind them, the branded favors, Home Sweet Home, were scattered on the lawn, some crushed under guests' shoes. The champagne tower leaned precariously, one glass tipping, falling, shattering. Inside, the house was quiet. I walked into the living room, where Valerie had replaced our family photo months ago with her decorative mirror. I reached into a drawer and pulled the photo back out, the one of Dad and me painting the baseboards. I set it on the mantel where it belonged. Outside, voices rose, fading as the guests drifted away. I sat on the couch, the one they'd nearly thrown out, and let the weight of it all sink in. For the first time, the house didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. Whole. Mine again. They thought they could erase me. All they did was give me a clean page. And I wrote the ending myself.